I've been trying for the last couple of years to be able to get Dave Kennedy to come in and actually keynote for us, and he is a hardworking man. He has several companies and a ton of employees and lots of things going on. Oh, he also runs DerbyCon. So we stand around occasionally and actually kind of trade stories about what's going on, and it's the same thing with a different geographic location. And the last conversation was, you got to be tired, man. And I'm like, yeah, you know exactly where I'm at. You know, after a while, you're just like, yeah, I'd like to sleep, but I'm going to miss something. So you kind of keep motoring along. So we could have gotten you an award or a medal or something kind of, you know, gold and shiny, and said, we really appreciate everything you've done for the community. We do. But this is SkyDogCon, so we've got to have a little bit of fun. So we got you a little something, if you don't mind.
That's awesome.
So
love it.
for the ultimate in clown defense, we have obtained for you. We have obtained. Flip your thumb. Flip your thumb. Hey, Dave. There you go. And not only, we got you a couple extra clips and some more rounds to go with it. So, ladies and gentlemen, Ski Boy, king of the Whippy repartee. So,
thank you so
excellent.
much.
We appreciate it. So, if you guys don't mind, a round of applause for Dave Kennedy. He's going to do a talk for us. Thank you, Dave. That was good.
All right, thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause for everybody that makes SkyDogCon possible, seriously. So thanks for coming out to my talk today. It's a pleasure to be out here at SkyDog. I've actually been traveling a lot lately, so I'm kind of not sure what time zone I'm in at the moment, but I think I'm an hour behind, so we're good. I actually was upstairs taking a shower, which is what you're supposed to do at these conferences. But I was taking a shower and I looked at my phone and it said, I looked at my watch and it said, 5:44. I'm like, oh God, I'm like still like, just getting my shower. But it was 4:44, so I made it in time. So I smell good. I'm Dave. What I'm going to be talking about today is abnormal behavior detection in large environments. And what's cool is, when I kind of started off doing security, it was all offensive, breaking stuff and exploit research and, writing tools that break stuff and writing tools that break other people's tools and having a lot of fun with breaking stuff because breaking stuff was so awesome. And it is still awesome, by the way. It's the best thing ever. But breaking stuff is the greatest thing ever, but there has to be a time where we fix things. And there has to be a time where the industry moves forward on fixing things. And I think we as an industry do a very good job at breaking things, but we don't necessarily do as good of a job of fixing things. And there's a lot of problems with that. You look at culture, you look at companies, but we've been crying wolf for 15 years about how we're going to get breached and how we need funding and how we need all these other things. And, we're finally at a point now where companies are now like, hey, we'll give you what you need. What do you want to do? And now we don't know what to do. We have so much stuff that we have to do in such a little time to protect our companies, and we have 10 years or 20 years of neglect on the infrastructure. So it's difficult for us to fix things very quickly, but we can do it. So today's talk is looking at me as an attacker and what I do as an attacker, but also how do you defend against these types of attacks? Because what we do as attackers isn't magic. It isn't something that we do. It's something that anybody can do, but most of the people that do the defensive stuff don't necessarily understand that. I'll skip the intro slide. But good news is Mr. Robot Season 3 is coming. Everybody looking at Mr. Robot? Good stuff, right? Yeah. The folks that put that on are awesome. We're super happy about that. I'd also like to announce my vice president. I decided to do Chris Enegi. That's after I punched him in the groin area at DerbyCon. It was well deserved. Does anybody know the history behind how Chris and I actually met? This is, what's that? Match.com. I swiped left and right. Grindr. There's kids here, everybody. No, funny story. when I was in the original Backtrack, actually at the time it was Ironwax and Wapix. So Mutz had started a chat room for just security basically at the time. So Mutz from Offensive Security. And I was an op at the time, and we kind of ran the channel or whatever, and all this other stuff in IRC. And this guy comes in, it's Logan WHD or whatever, Chris at the time, and he comes in and he's in the chat room. First time he's ever got into the chat room before. We used to troll a little bit, like pretty hard on folks, just for fun. And Chris comes in, he's like, "Hey, I'm trying to get this alpha driver to work. Does anybody know how to get it to work?" And me, I had no idea who Chris was or anything. I posted back in the chat. I'm like, "Yeah, man, it's already been fixed. Just go here and download this, and you're all set." And he goes to a site, and it's a horrible, horrible site. It's the site that you never want to go to. It's a shock site, And Chris is one of those guys that has never seen something like that before. So he's like freaking out and screaming in his house, trying to get out of it. Okay, and he. That's a good picture. It's on the fly. It's amazing. And so, he closes out of the IRC session because he's trying to completely close out of his entire screen. So like 5 minutes go by, and we're all giggling in the chat room and everything. And like 5 minutes go by, and you see Logan WHD joins the IRC chat room. And he's like, "Who is that jerk that just was in here and sent me to a horrible site?" And he couldn't remember the person that actually sent it to me. Sent it to him. I'm like, "Listen, man, that guy's horrible. We kicked him out. No big deal." I'm like, "What you really need to do is go to this site." And it was one of those ones that took over your browser and it just hops around your browser. And it was like, it was a bad day for him. So Chris wanted to beat me up, okay? So we're at ShmooCon, and he had become at this point in time good friends with Maddie and all those other ones. And so Chris really wanted to beat me up. He's like, I want to fight you. He's like, "I got kids and all this stuff." He's coming to me. He's like, "Man, I got kids. What happens if they've been sitting there?" And I'm like, I'm sorry, man. Listen, I got kids too. I didn't have any kids. I'm like, "Why don't I show you a picture of my kids?" And it was a horrible sight again, right? So he actually chased me through ShmooCon, literally for a long time. And so after that happened, Mutz and Iris decided to do a peace treaty between myself and Chris, okay? And so we finally did a peace treaty and everything. And I don't know why I homed in on Chris. It just, I guess I felt that it'd be a long-lasting relationship between the two of us. And I was having a lot of fun with it. And so at the time I had a GMC Acadia. Anybody ever had that before? So there's a car that in the car at the time. There was a lot of cool hacks you can do to it, the GPS wouldn't allow you to program it or whatever. So you could put a bypass in to make it think that it was going at 0 miles per hour, so you can still input your GPS everywhere. And so Chris is in the front seat, and I had modified the heat on the seats to be like an extreme temperature, like boiled the seat hot. And so Chris is sitting down in the seat, and Mutz and Iris are in the back, and we're going to a steakhouse. And I'm taking everybody out to a steakhouse just to apologize for how rude I've been behaving. And Chris is sweating profusely, and he thinks he's getting sick. He's like, "Man, I think I'm getting sick." And he hadn't been saying anything. He hadn't said anything for 15 minutes. So I kept driving around the steak place over in circles, I was having a good time. He's sweating, and he lifts up his seat, and he's like, "Man, it's just." And he yells, "My behind is on fire," extremely loud in the car. And then after that, we became really good friends. So my life has been dedicated to the torment of Chris, and it's been a wonderful relationship. So I couldn't think of a better vice president than Chris. No, Presley's not. I mean, Secretary of Defense?
Or offense.
Or offense? Secretary of Offense?
Secretary microaggression.
Secretary of State, maybe.
Yeah, there you go.
Negotiations on treaties with that, yeah.
That'd be good. People would just do whatever you wanted to, man.
He's a modern day Henry Kissinger.
Secretary of Shit.
So, back on topic. So what we're here today, what's that?
Does that make him Trump?
Well, my plan was to build a cyber wall that we could all stop all the cybers. So, actually, anyways. So on the intro piece of it, what I wanted to talk about today is that piece, understanding defense and offense. And if you look at what we do as attackers, most, if not everything that we do as attackers, you can detect. The problem is that we all have a lot of different techniques, and there's a lot of different ways of compromising organizations. There's a lot of ways of breaching systems. And so you have to look at the behavior around things and how things work in order to actively go and do it. And I'll talk a little about that. But one thing I can say is that attacker behavior is abnormal. Should Bob in sales ever communicate with Mary in IT? in a direct computer-computer relationship. Should there be any communications to like a NetBIOS or admin shares or things like that from one system to the other? No. Should that happen across the board? One system going to the next system, unless you're help desk or something like that. But other than that, you shouldn't see lateral movement in environments. Lateral movement's a very specific indicator in your environment. I'll talk a little bit about that. I like this. Jeremiah Grossman put it up there, and it said that an adversary just needs to find one vulnerability to win. To do that, they need to know just one system the target didn't know they owned. And we all have those systems. We have systems in our environments we don't know are vulnerable out there. But what's interesting is we always hear that the red team always wins, right? We always hear that the offense always wins no matter what. And it's been true historically. I mean, we go in as a pen tester and we break into everything. We get DA, we get all their credit cards, and then we high five each other, and then we land a 400-page report onto the blue team. We're like, hey, have a good day. We'll see you next year. And we're going to do the exact same thing. It's over and over and over. It's cyclical. And so it's always been said that the blue team is at an extreme disadvantage because they have to know 100% of everything that's out there. And I disagree with that. I don't think we need to defend 100% of the things out there. And Egypt made it a really good point. And Egypt is a red teamer. And I thought this was a really awesome statement. Jeremiah said, counterpoint, once you're on a system, adversary role reverse. Blue only needs one indicator of compromise to catch red. And that's the thing. If you build an environment that is designed to tackle what we're dealing with right now, you can find them in the early stages. And that's the biggest thing about what we're dealing with today. We detect breaches 6 months later, a year and a half later. That's unacceptable as far as what we're trying to deal with. But can we detect a breach a day as it happened, or a few hours as it happened, or maybe a few minutes after it's happened? That's a much better defensible position than trying to secure everything. We can't do it. I'm not saying you need to just stop and turn off your firewalls and allow any anys in, and then we're going to put some defenses in. It's got to be a layered approach on this. But what I think we can do is really focus on creating a simulated environment within our own networks, as well as creating defensive techniques where we can detect things in our environments that actually work. And I'll talk a little about that. So we have to understand attack patterns. Now, the biggest thing that I see as lacking in this industry currently, and it's not a bad thing, it's just we haven't evolved to it yet, is offense not understanding defense and defense not understanding offense. The biggest thing that I would do is go into a company, destroy them, take everything, and I couldn't figure out why the next year they had the same vulnerabilities. But once I became a chief security officer for a Fortune 1000 company, I realized why. Because we have meetings about a meeting to fix an old legacy system that's been around for 6 years, and it's the core of the business, and if they drop it down, we lose $1 million a day for the company. That's why. And so it's not a good excuse, but it's an excuse, and it's the reason why we see these systems still out there today, and there's a lot of reasons why we still have a lot of these exposures. So one of the concepts that a lot of folks talk about, and I agree with this, is the purple team, which is the red team and blue team working together to understand each other. But I also think that defenders need to be offense. I think defenders need to understand what's going on. And the problem is, defense typically in most organizations is in charge of like the SIM, for example. One person or a group of people is just monitoring the SIM, and that's all they do all day long is just that SIM stuff. They don't get any exposure to different use cases or how we're actively going and attacking systems or understanding the offense. Same thing for firewall admins or anybody in your environment that's focusing on vulnerability management. Maybe you do have a red team, but that red team is usually the elite group that everybody wants to be in, and then they may share some of the findings or how they do things. But what we found effective is actually working with companies like their blue team and just taking a week off of what you do and just focusing on everything. And don't make the main purpose of a engagement, of a red team exercise, to be just compromising everything. Take every stage of the attack and see what you see and see what you don't see and figure out why you don't see it. We were doing a really big purple team exercise. It was like a 3-week ordeal. And the customer didn't want us to get DA, didn't care about that. What they wanted us to focus on is just finding ways that we can detect exactly what we're doing. So PowerShell, we had PowerShell licked after a week. That's a great one to go through. We had lateral movement licked in a week. That's how I figured out the pass-to-hash detection, which I'll show you folks in a little bit. So finding different methods for finding things in your environment is super awesome. So let's talk a little bit about attacking. On the offense, the traditional ways that we're breaking in now is pretty easy. We do a little bit of homework. Doesn't need to be a lot. So looking at somebody's LinkedIn profile, or creating a pretext that looks believable, or just stupid stuff like, hey, the easiest fishes that always work are the laziest ones. You don't need to actually create a very good fish for somebody unless you actually give them incentives. Like a good example is we do one that works all the time. It's do a survey. Would anybody here click on a survey and fill out a survey? Maybe, maybe not, right? F you. But if you had a $10 gift card at the end of it, would you do it? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. We got like 98% success rate if you offer a $10 gift card at the end of it. No, so hang on. So we actually found if we said like 30 or 40, we got flagged right away because they know their company's way too cheap to give a $30 or $40 gift card out. $10 is acceptable. $5 actually works as well. $5 gas cards, $10 gas cards, those work extremely well. There was one when we did, we broke in and we were offering the first 50 employees that did the survey would get 50 free iPhones to celebrate the 50-year anniversary of the company. And we had like thousands of people clicking on this and everything. It was amazing. We actually, our site started getting a little bit sluggish because we had so many people clicking on it. It sucked. I didn't have load balancers in place. But you do stupid things that people will click on and incentivize them and create a sense of urgency, and it works very well. So homework is great. Then building your threat model about what you're going to actively go and do, your infrastructure, how you're going to attack them, the main methods for it, your pretext, all that good stuff. And actually do your attack and persistence and exfil. Now, one thing I want to show you about homework is doing some magic, okay? So let's do some magic. So Dave, you're on camera here, okay? So you're giving me permission to pull some sensitive data about you, correct? I will not display it on the screen. Are you going to pull something from me? I'm not going to pull that for you. I'm going to take it off the screen just for a second, and I'm going to do a little demonstration here about how easy and readily available people's information is, okay? So Dave, the only thing that you gave me prior to this guy, and I can do anybody in the audience too, I don't care. The only thing you gave me was your name, which was really hard for me to find, and the location of where you lived. And when I say location, just the city, just for me to home down the results, because it's going to take me a little bit to go through it. So what I'm going to do now... That's amazing. One second here. Oh, I can find it. Don't you worry about me.
If you can't find shit on me, you suck at recon. I'm so ridiculously documented, doxed.
Try yellowpages.com.
Try adultfriendfinder.com.
I'm on goatsy.com.
Hang on. It takes a second. I'm combing through a lot of data here. Give me a minute. It's not instant. No.
Is this where we find out Dave Marcus is really a spy and like it's all been a cover?
I'm not that clever, Joey. He is featured in the International Spy Museum. I am, that's true.
I'm actually having trouble finding you. No. Give me a second. All right. Give me a second here. I got to search back. I'm going through it now. This would be the first time it ever failed, by the way. Dude, there's like 5 million David Marcuses.
I just screwed myself with video.
What'd you do? Oh, yeah.
Well, I've had several. Kenya.
Aha, here we go. You're not deceased, right? Well, I may totally fail on this one. Damn it. All right, I'm going to try somebody else different.
Might as well give him a John Smith. Come on. Security through obscurity.
Dude, there's so many results. I got 122,000 Dave Marcus.
Hey Dave, do me, because if you can't find me, then you that's just horrible.
You said dude. Hang on a second.
Yeah, oh yeah, do me, yes.
Big boy.
I've been awfully lonely.
All right. So which one do you want to do next? Who else wants to go? I messed.
Here, Dave. Do me. If you can't find me, then you've got trouble. My name is too damn common not to find me, or uncommon.
All right.
Yeah. You can Google me if
So I get your permission to do personal information, right? I got your permission to do personal information.
Sure.
Cool.
Do me, Dave, do me.
Hang on. I'm gonna get it.
There's a phrase you hear every day. What? You can't keep your neck closed?
Dude, if I fail on this has been the first time. I've done this demo like 30 million times. Is it? And is your full name Joey?
Joseph. But trust me, the systems you're doing, yeah, Joey.
There's only like 2 Asian Quinshaws in the world, so that'd be an easy one too. You need a home one. Me, 30.
You live in Nashville, right?
Greater Nashville metro area.
Hang on. All right, I might totally fail on this one. Damn it. All right. Thank you. I failed on that one. Sorry.
Try Dave Kennedy, see what you get. After that performance, you're qualified for president.
You put it back on again.
I'm ham radio, so it's pretty easy to find like my address.
It's all good. So normally what I can do is pull, there's like a lot of shady API sites that you can get access to, and sites that are legit, and you can actually pull people's full social, date of birth, all that other stuff, and I totally failed on that one. So, oh yeah, sorry. I thought you were doing that. Oh, that was my fault. Ladies and gentlemen, magic. Listen, they don't always go as expected, all right? So, oh God. All right, listen. At the end, if I got some time at the end, I'm gonna do it again, and I'll get it this time. All right, I'm not gonna stop. But if you look at some of the phases of an attack, some of the son of a bitch. But it's the first time I've ever failed at that. It's horrible. Anyways. Yeah, I know. I appreciate it. What was I going to show? It would have been, I wouldn't have shown it on the screen, but I would have showed him, but it would have been his full social, date of birth, his family members' names, phone numbers, all previous records, anything like that. Police reports, stuff like that too, so it's all public. The problem is there's so many Dave Marcuses, dude, and you live in Maryland. It's like there's like 9 million Dave Marcuses. It actually said there's too many for me to result back. I'm like, all right. Anyways, I'll comment.
Hey, I'm the only Cameron Maris. Go for it.
I'll do it after this. So look at we got a life cycle of attacks. I don't even know how to shift to this now. I quit. No, I was kidding. So if you look at a life cycle of an attack, the hardest phases to the attack are they're going to be the beginning phases, right? When they're starting to do intelligence gathering and things like that, and other different phases, recon gathering, build or buy your tools, all that good stuff. But when you start getting to initial intrusion phase, this is the point in time where we should have indicators in our environments to start to detect this. And we do, right? We have antivirus or next-gen bullcrap and all this other stuff, right? That is supposed to stop us. What's great is, interesting enough, I didn't know this or not, but there's a certain SMTP gateway that virtualizes stuff when it comes in your environment. I don't know which one that is. But if you put 5 attachments in a zip file, it gets around it because it says it's too large of a thing to scan through, so you can actually get through any of those. Anyways. Or if you actually put, hey, if my CPU count is greater than 2, then execute. Otherwise, exit. And it gets through it as well because their sandbox environments are all predictable. So you can just say if, yeah. And I'm not saying cuckoo. I'm not saying cuckoo. But the initial intrusion piece of it is one of the hardest ones to detect, but we do have controls in there. But the problem we typically have after that is if we don't detect that initial persistence piece, that initial attack vector into the environment, what do you detect on after that? And that's where we tried to develop technology around SIMs. And SIMs are great because it's a large collection of information in your environment, but it's so much information that we don't know what to do with any of it. So where do you even start on large conglomerations of information? And so that's why you see like SIMs, for example, take a long time to actively go and mature. You're talking years and years and years because you continuously develop use cases after use cases after use cases and everything else, and you have to maintain it. Has anybody ever tried to maintain a SIM? Right, yeah, huh? It sucks. And then they switch from one database to the other, so you have to do a whole conversion, and it's just terrible, right? So it's hard to deal with those because there's such a big thing to actively go and do, but it's not a bad thing. If you look at most methods of exploitation, at least for the initial compromise part, they're still executables. Executables to this day are still the #1 way that we still get compromised, and yet we have ways of fixing that. If everybody just went to a code signing cert, we'd literally reduce a large percentage of everything that we have out there. Literally, if you made a requirement for all of your vendors as part of their SLAs to say, hey, any binary that you ever send to us from a software perspective has to be code signed, that'd be a pretty awesome thing. We don't allow any code signing executables in our environment if they're not code signed by a legitimate one that we trust. So executables are interesting to detect. If you look at Ben's NPS, you may have seen NPS, really good tool. Not PowerShell. It's a way of executing PowerShell without ever touching PowerShell. So if you're looking in your logs for PowerShell, you'll never see this happen, even though it's full integration for PowerShell. So NPS is a great one. He even released at DerbyCon memory NPS.ps1, which uses PowerShell to download not PowerShell and then execute memory. And then it doesn't actually download or drop an executable. It just uses no PowerShell memory, and you never actually touch PowerShell, which I thought was kind of weird to use PowerShell to download no PowerShell, but it's fine. It's cool. But what's nice about this is from a detection standpoint, if you're using NPS, it's very difficult to actively go and detect. Physical is definitely harder to detect. Here's a good example. Here's one of our guys, Paul Beebs. We call him Beebs. He looks like Justin Bieber. And Beebs was sitting outside of a building, and these are one of my favorite ones to do because you can literally do anything you want to as an attacker. Like, for example, I walked into a retail store, and I cut the line where the cash register was at, and I walked out with the cash register. And I didn't have a badge on it. I didn't have anything. I just walked in, and those things are effing heavy. I don't know if you've ever tried to carry a cash register, but yeah, they're heavy. They're really heavy, especially when they have a lot of cash in it too, right? And so I grab the cash register, and I walk out, and I'm sitting there like this, and people are looking at me from the store, and I look at them, and I nod, and I keep walking. And I put the cash register in my car, and I drive off with the cash register. I don't know what to do with the cash register at that point, but we had to put it back. This is a good example of in-person stuff that you can do that obviously is very hard to detect. And again, I'll talk about detection here a little bit. So here's Beebs. He's out here, and he's posing as a security guard. He's just dressed all in black and looks like a security guard. He's got a little thing in his ear. And a random employee walks past, and he says, excuse me, ma'am, our security system's having issues. Can I see your badge real quick and record the number on it so I can buzz you in the back, and we'll verify everything else. And so she takes her badge off, gives it to him. He's got a prox mark in there. Writes the number down. Checks it in his list. And then walks into the building. Those were the best ones. Or you can just dress up in a suit and bring balloons in. And then walk right past. Get ridiculous with things. We're like, wonder what we can do next, just to mess with it. Or you can be deviant. Anybody seen this one before?
There was a rec sensor up there.
Shit's horrible. It's one of the best ever. That one's my favorite. And obviously the physical ones are much difficult to detect. But if you look at actually detecting attacks and what we're here for, PowerShell injection is actually very easy to detect. I recommend some folks to follow: Matthew Graber, ObscureSec, Matt Nelson, Harmjoy. I also recommend Sean Metcalf. Sean Metcalf actually has a slide that lists all of the known ones that he was able to identify of malicious PowerShell commands that you should never see in your environment. Like, hey, if they're doing invoke-mimikatz, like, I understand you can rename that, but no one does because no one looks at it. Like, why aren't we looking for just the basic stupid stuff for invoke mimikatz? Like, why is there, anyways. But it's pretty legit. Like, there's a legit business purpose for invoke mimikatz in a network. You actually have a legitimate purpose for that? Oh, okay. Things like encoded command. Encoded command you don't typically see in environments. Base 64 decodes you don't typically see in environments. Should PowerShell ever be calling kernel 32 DLL for base memory address enumeration and then injecting code into PowerShell, its own process and allocating and all that good stuff? No, you don't typically see that. So there are things that you can identify very quickly on PowerShell. And Sean Metcalf's got a great piece on that. But there's a lot of things. Now, what companies mostly fail on is the regular expressions that they use or the commands that they're looking for. A good example is, did you know there's 12 ways to look for encoded command? There's 12 different variations of encoded command. You can do -E, -EC, -encoded command, -ENC, -ENC. Oh, sorry, blacked out for a second. I'm still messed up from the earlier demo. So you can do the whole thing back and forth. So if you're not looking for those very specific things, it's difficult. Now, interesting enough, in PowerShell, there's only 2 commands that start with the -E. So you can actually pretty well do a -E and then anything past that. The next one is execution policy. So bypass execution policy or set execution policy is the other E that you can see in there. So you can actually find PowerShell injection fairly easy. Then there's this, invoke obfuscation. Dan released an awesome tool. I think he's actually speaking at Bluehead on this one. But it basically obfuscates your entire PowerShell code. So as an attacker, it totally jacks us up, or on the defense, it totally jacks us up because it obfuscates all of your PowerShell code and makes it pretty much unmanageable. But there's still a lot of things that it will do to actively go and execute. Like, should you ever see set execution policy to bypass, or set execution policy to unrestricted, or see base 64 encoded strings, or things like that. Those are key indicators in your environment that should definitely not be there and you should definitely be looking for. Honey tokens. So I was digging through some Windows APIs. That's what I do on the weekends for fun, that and bourbon. And I saw WinAPI create process with login W. Now what's interesting is anybody familiar with like the net use command? But there's a /net only. Somebody ever seen that before? So net only, what it does is it doesn't actually authenticate the credentials, and it emulates and stores the passwords in memory just like it would like a wdigest issue with mimikatz. So what you can actually do, and the problem with net only is that you have to give it input, so it prompts for a password. There's no way to actually give it a password. So you have to script it through like pexpect or something like that, or you can just call this API and create process with login W. You can give it a specific process. You can give it a domain name, username, and password. Create a PowerShell script, and there's actually one I'll show you here in just a second, and put that across your entire environment. A good example of this is using honey tokens. 1 second here before I go to this one. Was that it? Yeah, that's it. Before I do that, I'll show you one more thing real quick. So with honey tokens, you can spray and use a PowerShell. Just use a scheduled task or a cron, not a cron job, but well, I guess you can use a cron job now. You can do scheduled tasks and have it spray fake credentials in memory. And what I'd recommend doing is making a domain admin on your domain controllers and give it just a super crazy complex password, like 50, 500 character password or whatever, and just lock that in the safe. If you ever see those credentials and spray fake credentials in your network, right, and you make it a nice complex password, make it look believable. If you ever see a login attempt fail for that account, something's actively wrong in your environment and that something is compromised and something's amiss and there's an attack in your environment using something like mimikatz to go and do it. Another good way is, everybody familiar with local link multicast resolution protocol or LLMNR or NVNS, NetBIOS name services? Yep, a few of us. So those are very interesting because tools like Responder or Envy, what they will do is your Windows machine by default, unless you have multicast turned off in group policy or NetBIOS over TCP/IP, what will happen is the Windows machine will look for a specific file server. Like, let's just say I log in and it tries to map drives. So what it'll do is it'll say, hey, where's file server 1? And it'll say, do I have it cached? Well, no, it's not cached. Is it in my host file? Well, no, it's not in my host file. Well, before I go and I flood the traffic to my DNS servers, I'm going to ask locally, for efficiency purposes, to check to see if file server 1's on my local subnet. And with Responder, what you can do is say, yep, I'm I'm that file server 1. I'm good to go. Just pass me your creds, and it passes net NTLM v2 hashes, or depending on if your legacy environment, net NTLM v1, or you can pass like WPAD and a lot of other things. So it's a way of getting credentials in an environment as pen testers, and a good way of actively going and compromising it. Ben figured out, and this is a really cool one, event log 4648. You can do scheduled tasks again and just look for this. And he created a tool called PowerShell Defense, and you can see it in there. There's a one in there. What you can do is you can spray that across your network, and if you ever see that event log with that username and password, make it whatever you want to. It doesn't matter. You don't even have to have the exact account. Should that username and password ever be legitimate in your entire environment ever, why would those credentials ever be explicitly used to log into a remote system ever? So you can detect responder and invade right in your network right away by looking for that specific event ID and those explicit creds being used in your environment. So you can find it very quickly just by going through and doing that. 4625 failed login attempts, same thing. You go and you crack the passwords. You can actually identify those and figure those out. And so there's 2 tools that I recommend. So Ben's got the good one there. There's also the fuzzy security one, which is the invoke run as. That's the PowerShell script that you can use that uses create login process W. That's the API. You can literally just use that and create a scheduled task in your environment and spray credentials in your environment for the tool. So things that totally mess us up as pen testers, right? Because if I see a DA, first thing I do is I look at processes, I drop to a shell, I start to enumerate the domain. I look at what groups, what systems, where people are logged in at, who has what permissions to what systems, what file systems or file servers are accurate for me. How do I get to that system? What are my objectives, and how do I move to a certain system that may give me access to it? If I see a domain admin token in memory, and I go and I drop to a shell and I see that, and I do a net user space that user / domain, and I see it's a domain admin, I'm going to try to use that account just once, make sure it works. But that one time is all you need to detect me. That's that one indicator that you can go and actively find, and that's what a lot of the attackers do. Pass to hash detection. This is one of my favorite ones. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how this works, and there was a lot of blog posts out there, and none of them said, all of them would basically say pass to hash couldn't be detected because it emulates so good regular traffic. And what's interesting about pass to hash detection is that all the blog posts are like, well, you can kind of detect it, but it has exorbitant amount of false positive ratio. And so basically, if you look at the NTLM SSP account, that'll tell you if it's being actively used or not. But there's so many different variations that actually trigger pass to hash legitimately in your environment. Like, for example, if you're on an RDP session, you kill your RDP session, you go do it again, that exhibits pass to hash. Remote file share, you get disconnected, reconnected, exhibits pass to hash. There's a lot of things that exhibit pass to hash in your environment. And so what we did is we looked at a lot of analysis. And we actually were able to find a very stable way of detecting it with very low false positive ratios. There's a blog, if you go to binarydefense.com, you go to our blog page, I have a full write-up on exactly how you build out your rules for that and exactly what you need to do and actively go and do it. Now, what's interesting with pass to hash is there's really only 2 places on your network where legit hashes are going to be at. Your first is going to be your local account, local admin accounts, right? Your local machine accounts and those things, right? So workstation accounts, server, local admins, those types of things, right? Those are going to be your normal like NTLM hashes in your environment. Not net NTLM v2, not cache credentials, not those stuff that I can actually use to pass the hash in different environments. I caught myself. Stuff that you can actually use in your environment. So there's one spot there. Your other place is domain controllers, which are typically more protected, and segmented off, all that good stuff. So we know that an attacker, if he's going to be leveraging pass to hash, is going to have to either crack credentials or use those hash values somewhere in your environment, like local admin accounts. Like, hey, I social engineer somebody and I get access to their computer. I escalate myself to admin somehow, and then I extract the hashes from that machine, and that hash is the same across other systems across the network. So what you can do is you can say, okay, well, look for event ID 4624, which is a successful login. Look for login type 3, which is network login, which means remote login. The host name, this is not 100%, and I don't recommend using the host name as a method for detecting. Metasploit, as a good example, will randomize the host name. So it's very obvious that something's not right in your environment, but not everybody uses Metasploit. Not all the attackers use Metasploit, right? So I don't recommend host name, and I would keep that there. The last part about it is the key length. What I found is that Microsoft, through normal communications, will assign a key length to that session, which is essentially the communications back and forth. So key length will always be 128 for RDP and for any normal protocol that happens out there, but it will not be the same for pass to hash. So if you do key length is 0, login process NTLM SSP, login type 3, 4624, and it's only a local account, so it doesn't have your domain in it, you have a very high reliance of detecting past the hash in your environment, which is really cool. Suspicious things that I typically identify out there, child processes with non-code signing processes that get spawned, like, hey, why is Excel ever spawning an executable that is not code signed in any way, shape, or form, or even an executable in any way, shape, or form? Why does Excel have a child process of those? Child processes are actually very good ways for us to identify indicators in environments. That's typically what will typically get launched out there. Run DLL32 hitting the internet. Why does that ever need to happen? What's his name? Subt found out how to use reg SVR32 to use SCT files to bypass application whitelisting and its proxyware. Why is reg SVR32 ever hitting the internet in any way, shape, or form? It doesn't make any sense. This is one of my favorite persistence hooks, and I definitely recommend looking for it. Remember the old sticky keys one, where like you could like reboot the machine like Linux, and then you would rename set.hc.exe or utilmen.exe to command.exe, and then you rebooted the machine and you hit the shift key 5 times, and a command prompt pops up. You don't have to log on the machine. You got like a command prompt running the system, right? Well, the problem with that as an attacker is you have to reboot the system, right? And then reboot in Linux and all that. It's kind of hairy. But what you can actually do is if you add this registry key, you don't have to reboot at all, and you can spawn whatever you want to. So drop your payload into that and have it go past set.hc.exe, and now you have a persistent backdoor in an environment through the debugger method in registry. So you don't have to reboot, you don't do anything. So literally just add that registry key, and then whenever it boots up, you can, or it doesn't have to boot up, and just hit the shift key 5 times, and boom, you have something. But it could be for any executable on Windows. Any executable on Windows. You can move that over and pass it to whatever file you want to. So it's a way of getting around a lot of the protections that you have out there, which is pretty cool. The local user only. No, this is HKey local machine. So this would be, it's system account. The HKey local machine would be the local machine itself. So any account on the machine would be impacted by it. Yeah. It's not a privilege escalation technique, so you can't add that with a regular user, right? And then have something execute on behalf of the system or anything like that. So. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you wouldn't want to do win login because it'll, instead of launching win login, it'll launch that, and so you won't ever be able to log in, and the machine will just crash. So. Calc is a great one, right? Everybody uses Calc all the time. No, but no, I mean set.hc is a great one because you can literally RDP to the box and then hit shift 5 times, and then boom, you have maintained access to the environment, which is great. Service creations. Still to this day, very easy to detect on. There's service creations you can build baselines with, but event log 4697. This is actually an advanced event log. And I found out, I didn't realize this, but Microsoft actually stores all of the group policies in a CSV file. Did you know that? I thought that was crazy. So I'm like, okay, well, whatever. But you can do advanced logging on this and actually detect service creations and all that good stuff in environments and look for abnormal patterns. Application whitelisting, I'm still a huge advocate of application whitelisting. I think, honestly, if you can get to a baseline in your environments, listen, 90-something% of the infections that we typically see are executables, right? So if you prohibit executables, what happens? You lose like 90-something% of the population, the noise that you have out there, right? So now you're only dealing with 10% of the noise out there. So now you got to deal with PowerShell and a bunch of other stuff. So those are the types of things that you can do in your environment if you can get to that pain point. I understand it's a pain in the butt to get to application whitelisting, right? Because no one here has, standardized images across the board and everything else out there, which would be awesome. Some of the other good mitigations, randomized disabled admins, using something like LAPS, for example, although it stores all of the passwords in clear text and group policy, which I never understood why. But you can also randomize the passwords or disable local admin passwords, lower use of privilege accounts, vulnerability management, all that good stuff, basic binaries. My favorite GPO, like this one totally jacks me up as an attacker for lateral movement. Deny access to this computer for the network, and then you put the local administrators group in there. And the reason for that is if I compromise a machine, and let's just say you have a shared administrator account across all of your machines, or even your domain user account is a local administrator across all the machines. That user can no longer authenticate with remote file shares and get admin access to the boxes. It stops everything, like past the hash. It stops lateral movement. It literally stops almost every piece that I would have to do to actually move to those systems. It's ridiculously easy to go and do. Now the problem is, again, go back to the business practices, right? You probably have a horrible system that everybody needs to admin into for some reason. I don't know why, but some companies do. But just that one GPO totally messes me up as an attacker. So we all need to be a little bit purple. Now I'm going to show you an attack here real quick. What time is it? 54. I got a couple minutes here. So anybody ever used that pen testers framework? If you haven't, highly recommend. It's a framework that I wrote. It's for updating your tools to latest and greatest. So one of the big issues that I ran into is, you get a Linux distribution out, and a lot of times your tools are out of date. So you wouldn't necessarily have the ability to keep them up to date. They're usually 4 or 5 months behind or things like that. What PTF is you can just grab and download Ubuntu or Red Hat or whatever you want to, and then you run it. So you just hit run. You can get, by the way, it's github.com/trusttech. But it'll update itself every single time, and I just released a new version last week. But it'll update itself every time, and there's a whole bunch of modules. Right now, we currently have 178 tools built in, and it's fast. So, like for example, when Pi Obfuscate came out, it was in there the same day. When Empire came out, same day, I think it was the next day. I was kind of inebriated at the point there when I added the module. But those are things that at least allow you to. And you can just basically say use modules install update all. And then that will install all the tools for you and your Linux distribution. Metasploit, set, every tool you possibly imagine, Empire, Responder, you name it. It's got a list of all of them, and it automatically handles all of that for you. So, and it's the Metasploit nightlies, so you get nightly builds of all the Metasploit stuff. So, it keeps your machine up to date with all the tools that you want to very easily. And you can also say, hey, I only want to install a few of them. You can just edit the config file and say, ignore these modules. And boom, you don't have to worry about those modules ever again. You can only install the ones that you absolutely want to. So it's actually really easy to add tools too. So look at something like the Social Engineer Toolkit. It's very much like Metasploit. So if you go in Nano, here, I'll blow this up a little bit. You Nano Modules Exploitation SE Toolkit. To make a tool, you just make the author of it, the description of it, what install type is it going to be git SVN or file, are you reaching for like a tarball or something else, the repository location, where you want to install it at, and what I really missed about like Backtrack and Wapix and iWax and all that stuff is you had a /pentest directory. Like I'd like to know what tools are for specific like techniques like wireless or post exploitation. If a new tool comes out and it's PowerShell, well, I want to know that. I want to know when new PowerShell tools come out. So it builds that whole structure for you again and allows you to go and do it. So you tell it what directory to put it in. And then any dependencies that you need, so like Debian or Fedora, what you need for those packages. And then any after commands. And after commands are like commands that you might need to run afterwards to install, like Python space setup.py space install. But it's got a great tutorial on how to do it, but that's all you need in order to write a module. It takes like 3 minutes to go and build a module. But if you go into it real quick, just do show modules. It lists all the modules they have. You can just install one at a time if you want to. So all the modules you need. So it's pretty cool. Anyways. So what I'm going to show you here is the latest version of the Social Engineering Toolkit. I released this last week, and the main purpose of this was a few. One is I made some improvements to the core engine and optimizations around how the HTA attack vector works. I also added a lot of stuff around PowerShell detection. Now, what's funny is Microsoft Security Essentials, McAfee, Symantec, and all the other ones started flagging on the PowerShell stuff, which is fine. That's great. They're building rules and stuff like that up. So I started looking at what they're flagging on. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll just obfuscate it to get around it. And so I started looking at the code, and I have a tool that basically chunks up my code, and then it submits it and tries to figure out which part of it is written for a signature. So it just chunks it up and keeps submitting it. And I send the whole thing, and it wouldn't get detected. I'm like, that's weird. Why am I still getting snagged? So I was trying to figure out how I was getting snagged. And I found that all of the antivirus vendors wrote a signature for if you see PowerShell space -enc, it flags. But if you do PowerShell space -enc o or en coded command or whatever, it got around it no problem. So I just changed that to -e now. I'll change it to EC next time, I guess, when it gets flagged. But so the latest version has all of those built into it, but also has a lot of ways for stability on the HTA attack vector. And that's the cool thing. Like the Social Engineering Toolkit, this method I'm going to show you, works all the time. Like we use this on every single customer. And what's great about it is every single person that has Windows has this attachment file type in their environment. It's not like you have to have Java installed or Adobe installed. It's literally built into Windows, which is awesome. So we'll go to number 1. Oh, it's funny, when episode 1, season 5 of Mr. Robot came out and they had set in there, the social engineer, somebody used the SMS spoofing message. They used like a really old version of set. So I had actually removed the SMS spoofing module from set Dude, I had like hundreds and hundreds of emails like, hey, I saw Mr. Robot. I want to spoof some text messages. How do I do it? It's not in set. I'm like, ah. So I was like, well, maybe it'll die down like after a week or two. It went on for like months. People were like complaining that the SMS spoofing module was in there. So I actually rewrote the whole SMS spoofing module, and it works really well, by the way. It's in there now. I don't know what you're going to use it for, but whatever. You're now going to have happy fans. We'll go to the website attack vector, and I'll do the HT attack vector, which is number 8. And then I'll go to site cloner, number 2. And I'll just clone trusted sec as an example. And you know my IP address? And I'll just do reverse HTTPS Metasploit as an example. And while that loads, let's paste this here real quick. Go to my Windows machine. This is Windows 10 fully patched. I don't think I allow copy and paste here, so. 168, 170.135. So I go to the site, and I would do this in a fish. I'm just showing you as an example here. Oh, that sucks. It's not going to fail again. Don't worry. I'll get it working. It's not going to fail. Don't you worry. I got this. You better not be taking pictures of me right now when this is not working. It's not SSL. I'm listening on 443. My Apache's running on N80. I'm gonna try rebooting next.
Jiggle the cable.
It's gonna work. I won't allow two demos to fail. All right, hang on. I'm going to actually close out of this completely and do that. Was it 130? Oh, Ubuntu, get rid of. 135. Son of a bitch. What is it? I don't understand. Anyways. It works. Trust me, it works all the time. Someone's messing with me. Someone's messing with me.
Can't you detect the hacker?
Well, anyways, it honestly does work. No, it's not the local. Hey. Nope, same nats.
Do you know how to use a computer?
Look at that. I'm not getting DHCP. Aha. I'm going to switch to bridge, then I'm going to move back. Actually, I can still probably get it with bridged. Give me 1 second. All right, there we go. What did I say? It was 132? So nervous. It really wants to work. Let me go back to net one more time. If it doesn't work this time, I'll give up on it. And 2 fails in a demo. I don't ever do that. Okay, I got an IP. No, I got an IP. The demo gods are allowing me. We're good.
Let's sacrifice a small
I don't know why I lost an IP. That was weird. So it's loading now. I'm good. So I see it's starting to load here. Yay.
And there was much rejoicing.
I know. Give it a second. It's going. Yeah, you see, I got a shell or something. So when it loads, it's just loading slow. It'll actually pop a prompt up to say, do you want to open? Now, the thing is like most of us wouldn't click open, but it's a very high success rate when it comes to social engineering because people are attuned to actually going and clicking on certain things. So what's nice about this attack is when you hit open, it compromises the machine. You get a shell in their box. It doesn't drop it doesn't drop into their HTA file. So it's a high content file that Microsoft builds into Windows. So you don't have to install any third parties. You're like, what the hell is going on here? Anyways. No, I cloned the site right. I had all this working. Oh, I had it all working right before I got in here. Anyways, it would have worked. I swear. So we all need to be a little bit purple. That's a demo failure or whatever. You guys get the concept of it and all that good stuff. So what I learned from this, I guess I don't even want to go into that, but let's see if we can burn this recording, right? This is not going to go public, right? No, but seriously, what I learn from folks every single day is a lot. And what I actually know now is literally absolutely nothing. And I learn from folks every single day on defense. I learn from offense. And that's what we should really be focusing on as an industry is learning off of one another to figure out how to get better at defense, all right? That's all I got. Thank you for coming to my talk. Sorry for the demo failures. Don't cut it off yet. I'm going to try one more time.